right, thanks be to God. Got a question? History quiz going on right now. We got a history quiz for you all. I want to see. Do you notice our windows in here are very tall and very elongated? It's a common feature of early American churches. And I have a question here for you with a picture of a common church. Why do old American churches have low windows? Anybody know the answer to why American churches, you see this picture here, they have these really long, tall, elongated windows that come really far down. A lot of churches, this was common architecture. Is there a theological meaning? Is there a social meaning? Is there a function that's being played here? Anybody?
I think it's drawing up to heaven, maybe.
Drawing up?
Everybody can see out, and everybody can be drawn up to heaven.
It definitely does play that role. And it might be. The answer I have in my back pocket, I don't know if it's the answer. So these could all be something together. Joan, did you have an idea?
I think it's to look up to thank God for.
Looking up and thank God. Absolutely. These windows are beautiful. They draw our eye up. There's a something in that architecture. There is not just this theological reason, there is a functional reason why American churches started to do elongated windows. And here is a clue right here. This is an actual picture of a receipt for pew rental for a Methodist church somewhere in Portsmouth in 1866. There was a practice in early American Methodism, and Methodists had a lot of the country churches back in these days, where to fund the church, to fund the functions of the church, the building, the pastor, they would have the congregants and members, they would rent out the pews to them. So you ever walk into a church and sit in somebody's seat, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is so-and-so's seat. They actually were able to purchase their seat. So you couldn't sit there. Their name would be put on the side of the pew. Their family name would be on the side of the pew, and they would get it for their whole family. And then it started to evolve. And the seats closer to the front were more expensive than the seats in the back. This was just something that worked. I'm not criticizing it at the moment, but this is just something that worked. They used it to raise money. Like our church, we did quilting back in the day. There was a lot of quilting. We actually have one of the notes that says how much money they raised from the quilting back in the 1800s at this church. It was like $30-some, which was a great deal of money. So what happened was the more prominent members in the town could afford the front seats. And then the farther back you go, the poorer you were. Now, kind of in today's culture, nobody really wants to sit in the front. They'd rather sit in the back. Back in these days, total opposite. Because the more farther up front you were, the more prominent in town you were. And so when people came in and came through the doors, they could see the socioeconomic status of the town displayed in the church seating arrangement. And this is an actual receipt. Someone paid $8 for this pew number, and it was made out to the senior warden. So this is a receipt that was given to that family, and they would have their seat. Now, what happens to the people who can't afford to rent a pew? Where would they sit? They would stand up. And then what would happen when the place filled up? They're outside. We're going to need low windows so the poor people can see what's going on inside the church. And, okay, this is how it was not the intention when they started, but this is how it played out. A lot of things start that way. We have good intentions, and then how it plays out is kind of like, oh, that didn't work out how I saw it. All the prominent rich people were able to sit in the front, and the farther back you went, the poorer you were, and if you couldn't afford anything, they had the windows, and you can come and stand at the window. What would happen if this church decided This is imaginary church. This was not something that our church did, by the way. We don't have any pew taxes that were here. This is just something that was a cultural thing back in the 1800s. Now, what would happen if one of these churches decided, you know what, we're going to have a potluck after church on Sunday, and we're going to set up the donation table right outside the windows. And it's now filled with tables of food and like money. So people can bring their potluck and drop it off here, but also their donations for whatever they're doing, they're all in front of the windows now. Where are the poor people going to go? Where are the people who can't afford the pew tax? Where are they going to stand and be able to engage in worship? They're going to be dispersed. They're going to be displaced, right? So with this story in mind, this is how we can understand this passage and why Jesus got so ticked off in this that he made a whip and chased people out. So this is how it starts. The Passover of the Jews was near. Passover was the high holiday. We've talked about the Passover a couple times here. It was the high holiday of the church calendar. This is when every single Jewish man, wherever they were in the world, had to travel back to this temple and bring a sacrifice with them. And then that would be sacrificed for the sake of their entire family for the whole year. So they're now going to be acceptable in God's eyes because one of their family members came and provided a sacrifice during this temple time. It was the big high holiday. The temple filled with so many people. And the city of Jerusalem grew in population from about 50 to 75,000 to almost 750,000 people in like a 5-acre area. So it just became the most bustling time. It was high holiday. It was like trying to go to the store on Christmas Eve to buy your last minute presents. Like we're talking that kind of busy. That kind of you can't just show up on Christmas Day without your gift for that so-and-so person. You're going to have to go get it. That is the big deal of this holiday. The highest holiday. Every single Jewish man in the entire known world had to come and participate in this. Or else your family, God don't like you that year. It's just, you will be ousted. You will be a social other. You will not be included. You will not be able to attend synagogue and temple, and you will be unclean. It's a big deal. So this holiday, this high holiday is coming. Jesus is like, we're going. We're Jewish men. We got to show up. We're going to do this thing. And they head into Jerusalem. And Jesus went to Jerusalem. In the temple, he found people selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and the money changers seated in their tables. Now the question, why are they, here's a cool painting of the temple. Why are they selling cattle, sheep, and doves? If everyone's supposed to bring their own thing, like potluck, everyone bring their own. When we do common meal, I think that's next week. When we do common meal next week, everyone's going to bring, something. Most people are going to bring something. If you don't, you're still welcome. But you got to bring something, right? Everyone's bringing their sacrifice. Now, it's got to be spotless and without blemish is what the Old Testament say of these sacrifices. It's got to be absolutely perfect. Now, have you ever been on a road trip and had your car at the end of that road trip spotless and without blemish? Like you take your family and your kids and your grandkids and maybe even your dogs and your cat and your bird and whatever else you got, an iguana, something. You're going to take your family with you and you get in the car and you drive off. And you're like, oh, we should stop at McDonald's and grab something. And then where do the wrappers go? They go on the floor, right? Because that's where they go. I don't know why. They go on the floor. There's no room for trash cans in cars. So now you get to the end of your destination. You do your thing. You buy all of your fancy souvenirs, and then you come back and you get back to your house. And when you get out of the car, you look at your car and say, my goodness, a bomb went off in there. Right? You can't go on a road trip and have your car returned without spot or blemish. How are you going to take a goat or a sheep or a cow 300 miles on foot and have it arrive totally spotless and without blemish? So people are supposed to bring their own, but there was some money to be made. And when there's money to be made, people are going to step in with some opportunity. And so they would look over their animals that they brought and they say, not bad, but, there's this dirt mark over here, or it's got, the horns are not so perfect. And they would find something wrong with the animal that was brought. And they say, good thing we got Model T over here for you. They're like car salesmen, right? It's like, yeah, can you put a price tag on your family's holiness this year? Like, that's their mentality. It's like, here we go. That animal didn't make it. Not so good. You're going to have to, do away with it. But we got one right here for you. So did you bring any money? Oh, good. You brought some money. Okay, let's see it. Yeah, we don't take that money. That's Roman money. Look at all the pagan symbolism on there. This is the holy temple, crying out loud. You can't change that money. Nope. Good thing. Over on side B over here, we have money that you can exchange for that pagan idolatrous coin right there. We have holy money over here. No pagan idolatrous anything on it. And we'll exchange that money for you for a small price. So you can see the money-making schemes that are coming along with this thing, right? Like, people show up, they bring their animals, they get shot down, not good enough. We have some for sale over here. They got to buy that. They can't use their money. They got to exchange their money. They exchange their money for a fee. They are getting extorted left and right by these money changers. Now, the temple is not just church. It's also the bank. This is where all the money of the entire people is stored. And they're filthy, stinking rich in this bank. It's like Fifth Third, like JP Morgan. Like, it was huge banking system. So these are bank tellers doing money exchanges and also selling goods. Where are they doing it? Where are they selling these animals? Where could they set up this money exchanging system so that they can capitalize on the space and make sure that they were visible? Well, there was a place called Solomon's Porch. There's a nice picture of it. James Tissot, great painter, did a whole Life of Christ series. We use a lot of his paintings for Good Friday. It was called Solomon's Porch. Solomon's Porch. Sounds pretty cool. They set up on a porch outside. Sounds like a good place, right? If you are in the summertime and you're going to have a family reunion, you need a porch, right? You're going to set up on the porch. You're going to put, some people have those ceiling fans on their porches for those hot summer days. Those are cool. I want to get me a roof for my porch and put a ceiling fan in it. That's one of my goals in life. Bucket list. I have low standards. So here, Jesus sees this. They're in Solomon's porch. They're all set up. Seems like a great place to be. What is Solomon's porch used for when they're not in Passover? This had a specific function. Solomon's porch, only Jewish men were allowed to worship in the temple. But there were also people who worshiped Yahweh who were not Jewish and male. There were women, there were Gentiles, there were people who were poor, who were sick, people who couldn't afford to get all their stuff done. They had a place, like under the windows of a church, for the poor people to gather and take part in what's going on. You won't be totally excluded. You can look through the windows and see what's going on. Solomon's porch was that function for the temple. If you were Gentile, that means non-Jewish. If you were female, if you were anything that wasn't a Jewish man, this was your place to engage with God in community. There was no other place for you. You couldn't go in, and this was the only place close enough to engage in the activity. And so these people show up to try and worship God in the best capacity that they can, because they're not super rich, or they're not the right gender, or they're not the right race. And they show up to engage to worship God, and where are we going to set up? Where are we going to stand? Where are we going to sit? How are we going to participate? And so these people that have hiked for miles and miles and miles have come, and the place where they can actually set up shop and engage with worshiping God is taken up by the money changers, extorting the people, making a killing. So you can kind of see why Jesus gets mad. The cleansing of the temple was a denunciation of a religion that allowed exploitation and a system that victimized the poor. Jesus' action was a prophetic sign of the radical transformation needed in society. That was John Sobrino. So you can see why Jesus gets mad. He makes a whip of cords. He drove them out of the temple with the sheep and the cattle. And he also poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. And he told those who were selling the doves, take these things out of here. Stop making my Father's house a marketplace. Okay, another question. Why are there cattle? Why are there sheep? Why are there doves? Why not just have all sheep? Seems like it would be a lot easier to just do one thing, right? This was also a socioeconomic status. If you were rich, you can afford a cow. And that's still true today, by the way. You ever try to buy half a cow from a farm? It's like, holy cow, I gotta drop $750 on this thing. If you were very rich, you could afford a cow. If you were blue collar, you can afford a sheep. If you were very poor, you could bring 2 doves or 2 pigeons, is what they were called. And that's there. So he drives out the sheep and the cattle with the whips. You notice that he doesn't do that with the doves. He drove out the money changers, the cattle, and the sheep with the whips. He's like, get on out of here. Drives them out. And then he looks and speaks to the ones selling the doves. Why did he do that? Yeah. He's specifically talking to the people who were exploiting the poor. He's especially mad at them. He's just like, get these things out of here. Like the rich people can go buy them somewhere else. But he specifically looks at the ones selling doves or pigeons for the poor to engage. And he pretty much says, how dare you exploit God's precious people? How dare you exploit the poor and take advantage of them? They're already having a hard time. That's pretty much what he's saying here. That's why he stops and speaks directly to the dove sellers. And he drove the other ones out. They can figure that out later to go out there. But he looks at the ones selling the doves and the pigeons, and he is very, very, very mad. Like, this is premeditated. He made a whip. Is that something you just grab a cord and It says he went and made a whip and got a whip, and that's pretty premeditated. This is something that Jesus is really passionate about. This is something that gets Jesus fired up. He is, in my fundamentalist upbringing, this is not what Jesus got mad about. In my fundamentalist upbringing, Jesus got mad if I used the cuss word. And then he brought out the whips and he was chasing me out of the church. So Jesus got mad if I watched the wrong movie, it was rated R. Unless it was The Passion, then that was okay. Because that was about Jesus. But no other, it was very, we get really legalistic sometimes with our faith and how we think of what makes God upset and angry. We're like, oh, God must be mad at me because I messed up and did this small little thing. Well, did you exploit the poor? That's the only time Jesus gets mad in all the Gospels, is when religion exploits poor people and takes advantage of them. That's the thing that gets Jesus all fired up. And I am all about a compassionate and loving presence of God. I believe God's presence is all love, but sometimes love gets upset. You ever notice that? Love cries when someone you love passes away or moves away, or when you miss somebody, love cries, right? And when love betrays you or when love hurts you, love gets mad. Anger is not an absence of love, it's an expression of it. And Jesus knows how to correctly aim his love with anger. He knows how to use his anger when in a loving way. He's like, this cannot keep happening here. And he does get he gets a little unhinged in this moment. So God is not up there nitpicking your every move and every time you swerve from the path, or you're make a little mistake here, make a little mistake there. God is not some accountant that is keeping track of every little thing you do. Because I don't think that's a big deal to God. But are you exploiting poor people in God's name? Oh, he can get pretty mad at that. It's a loving anger, But he can get mad. He drove the people out with a whip. He's like, nope, I ain't doing that here. You can leave this place now. I'm reclaiming and cleansing this whole place. That is, yeah, don't beat up on yourself for the small little infringements that you do. It's not, we tend to treat ourselves the way we perceive God is treating us. So our self-talk, our self-criticism is a revelation of what we think God thinks of us. You ever think of that? Because do you ever say, like, when you mess up, do you ever, like, use the third person? Like, oh, Tom, you're such an idiot. Why'd you do that? I don't ever speak to myself in the third person unless I mess up. And then I start getting down on myself and the self-critical talks come out and I'm talking in the third person like I'm outside of myself, pointing my finger at myself, criticizing myself. That is really weird, by the way. If you think about that. I always talk to myself in the first person. I'm not Elmo. I don't say, Tom would love to do this. I'm not Elmo from Sesame Street. I use, me, myself. But then when I criticize, I step outside of myself to condemn myself. And I use my first name. Like when I was a kid, my mom was like, Thomas Joseph. My middle name is Joseph. If you didn't know that, now you know that. Like, God is not out there nitpicking every little thing you do. God is not your biggest critic trying to tear you down and make you like this perfect angelic presence in the world. God is more concerned with justice than piety. Because you can do piety all by yourself. You can be the best person in the world and never, ever, ever mess up and still not understand God's love for this world and God's desire for justice to be exercised in this world. So don't beat up on yourself about the small infringes that you do, and you'll find you have more energy to not do those things. Because when you stop trying to be perfect, you can be good. But if you're trying to be perfect all the time, you'll never be good because you're never going to arrive at perfect. And you'll use up all of your energy trying to be good, trying to be perfect. You'll have none left to be good. And so it is very, very important that we learn to understand what gets God riled up. Injustice gets God riled up. And it is not God coming down to bring the stomp down. Jesus didn't kill anybody. He didn't hurt anybody. He's not practicing violence on anybody. He didn't use the whip on people. He's not unhinged in that way where he can't control himself. But he is very passionate about the issue of justice in this world, and especially justice for the poor and the excluded and the people on the fringes. James Cullen said this: Jesus' cleansing of the temple reveals his hatred of exploitation in the name of religion. He is outraged by the use of religion as a cover for injustice. That's a big thought to think of. But if you bring it back down into your body, into your life, this is where the self-criticism comes in, where we tear ourselves up and tear ourselves apart in the name of God, criticizing ourselves and bringing injustice down upon our own lives with our own thoughts about ourselves and our own words about ourselves and our own critiques about our actions in this world. And Jesus is just not interested in that. He's interested in justice. So then, of course, the religious people get really mad. And they said to him, what sign can you show us for doing this? I mean, that's a big deal. To go into the temple of the day and drive out all the people. He disrupted the economy, basically, what he did. This is the biggest money-making time of the entire year. He disrupted the economy. If you want to make people mad, people in power mad, you disrupt the economy. That's what he did. He disrupted the economy. And there's like, what sign can you show us that you're allowed to do this in this place? And Jesus said, destroy this temple, in 3 days I'll raise it up. And the Jews are like, and when it says the Jews, it's talking about the authoritative religious leaders. It says, this temple's been under construction for 46 years, and you're just going to rebuild it in 3 days? But Jesus says, no, I'm actually talking about my body. There's another image that really captured my attention. You see, peace is only found when we are not at war with ourselves. You cannot be at peace with God if you are at war with yourself. If you are constantly your biggest critic, and I'm not talking about trying to make yourself better by encouraging yourself to do better next time, like that's acceptable. But if you have self-hatred, if you have self-criticism, if you are constantly tearing yourself apart in the name of God, that is injustice. You don't have to do that. You don't have to endure that. And whoever taught you how to do that, Jesus is kind of upset about that. If somebody gives you an inner critic and then tells you that voice is God, that's called spiritual abuse. You can absolutely reject that. It's not God. The temple, a place of worship and prayer, had become a center of exploitation. Jesus reacts with, I can't say that word, vehemence? Is that the word? Vehemence? Vehemence? I think it's vehemence. Driving out the merchants and animals. He was combating the whole system of injustice and oppression represented by the temple. Right? We're not exploiting people here for money. We're not like telling people to wait outside because you didn't rent a pew. We're not practicing in the grand injustices that are obviously on display in this passage. But we can put injustice upon ourselves in the name of God. And there is, whoever taught you to do that, they were wrong. That's not what God is like. God loves you. God wants to see you succeed. God wants to see you be good. God wants to see you be exactly who you are. And there's no room for self-criticism. Because when you're not at peace with yourself, you're not at peace with others or God. Peace is never found in exclusion. When tempted to other someone, counter it with the prayer, I am peace this week. It's already true of us. We are peace. And so there's little cards on your pew, a little prayer that you can put in your pocket this week. And when you want to criticize yourself, when you want to criticize another person, when you want to other somebody, be like, oh, like then the peace is disrupted, and take that out and say, you know what, I'm not going there. For Lent, we're giving up that. I am peace. That's what we can do this week as a practice of Lent. So take one of those with you. Our closing benediction is from Psalm 19, retold by Malcolm Guite. In that still place where earth and heaven meet under mysterious starlight, raise your head and gaze up at their glory, the complete consort dancing, as one poet said of his own words. But these are all God's words, a shining poem waiting to be read afresh in every heart. Now look towards the brightening east and see the splendid sun rejoice. Rise and rejoice, the icon of his Lord's true light. Be joyful with him, watch him run his course. Receive the treasure of his light, pouring like honeyed gold till day is done. As sweet and strong as all God's laws, as right as all his judgments, and as clean and pure, all given for your growth and delight. Psalm 19 by Malcolm Guite.